Y'all, we need to talk about Kevin, his beef with his eldest daughter, Shari. By extension, we also need to talk about some new things about Jodi and Ruby, and we're going to do it all in today's video. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. Sofa's back there pretending to be a sofa. My name's Paul, and Roscoe P. Coltrane, who is my little chihuahua, who is our mascot official, is actually under the covers right now and refuses to come out and be a TV dog, as I like to call him. But don't worry, he's holding it down from over there. Now, you saw the thumbnail, you clicked it, we gathered around the pretend sofa, okay? Y'all, today we're going to continue our conversation about the 8 passengers case. Now, this case has been completely in the headlines recently. More and more information comes out about it. Our mouths fall further and further to the ground. Now, specifically what I want to do in this video is talk about Kevin Franke. And now here's the thing, I'll just go ahead and say this from the beginning. First and foremost, you know I ain't no doctor, I ain't no lawyer. I'm none of that fancy credentialed stuff, okay? These are basically hot take, just my opinions, that type thing coming from the sofa. So just keep that in mind. Look into the case yourself, come to your own conclusions, talk about it in the comment section cordially amongst one another, you know. So just know that these are just my opinions and whatnot. This is all gathered from very public information and news articles, which is how we will be reviewing these specific things here. Now, like I said in the little intro, with this one, as I was looking into this stuff that's going on recently, with him and wanted to, burglary charges against his daughter and all this stuff, I'm seeing other information about, like, they were saying this about Jodi and this about Ruby and whatnot, so I was like, we don't have to make a whole video on this. Okay, so that being said, we're getting ready to get started. Now remember, if you want to follow me on the old Insta, on the old gram, as the young ones call it, I do believe. They might call it something different these days, or they might have moved past that, just like they did Facebook and onto TikTok. Regardless, it's right here on the screen, and there's a little link in the description. You can follow me there. Mr. Roscoe hangs out over there. He really is the only reason worth following it, to be honest. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump on in. Now, in this first article we're going to review, I wanted to do this one first because it put a little tidbit out there about Jodi and some other things that were going on that I was like, haven't seen that yet. This could be all news to y'all. You might be like, Paul, this is last week, and I understand that. I'm not trying to crack the case up in here. I'm just trying to talk about it, okay? So let's go ahead and put the first thing on the screen. And you're going to see here that it says, Ruby Franke's husband, Kevin, says he's seen her just 4 times since they split last year after marriage counselor Jodi Hildebrandt got involved in their lives, and says he was shocked by child abuse allegations. This is by Mackenzie Tatananani, I hope I said that right, for Daily Mail, published October 6, 2023. Now let's move on to the first little clip here. It says, her estranged partner, Kevin, has now claimed he only learned of his family's whereabouts when his wife was arrested and 2 youngest kids, 10-year-old Eve and 12-year-old Russell, were in the hospital. Police allege the couple's son, Russell, was held to the ground with ropes while the women rubbed cayenne pepper and honey into his wounds. Okay, now the thing that I wanted to talk about with this, a couple of things. So yes, this is old news about him saying, I didn't know about that, and what abuse and all this. I've done other videos on that. We're not going to totally deep dive on that whole subject right there. However, I do have some specific thoughts on the whole thing of, but you knew A, B, and C were going on when you were living in the house and you were helping make these videos, right, with this questionable behavior. Now, I 100% can understand once Jodi came into your life, maybe some things did change, right? That seems to be the pattern with all these people when they talk about that. However, that doesn't negate the aspect of some very questionable stuff was going on prior to her arrival. Okay, now also we'll learn in this article as well where it's like, it doesn't sound like he was that far away, right? You would almost think he had gone out of state and done all this stuff, but I mean, he stayed away for quite some time. I get very conflicted feelings about this. Again, I'm not these people. I don't know them. I'm not walking in their shoes. I'm just looking from afar. I don't have kids, right? So I'm not trying to sit here and sound like I'm better than thou and all this kind of stuff, right? These are just my opinions here. But some of the stuff just seems so questionable. His decisions in this, and I'm just like, I mean, how can one remain this removed from the scenario to the point that, all this behavior is going on? I mean, really, it's like Ruby and Jodi had complete control over his family. So, that's here nor there at this point. We'll get more into it here in a little bit with some of the other allegations and whatnot. But also in this clip that we just read, I'm like, what? Okay, this was news to me when I read this. Now, I don't know when you're going to be seeing this. It could be over the weekend. It could be Monday. I don't know, okay? But I'm recording this on Friday. This was news to me, okay? I was like, oh, what? They were rubbing cayenne pepper and honey into his wounds? Are you sick? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? kitchen. I mean, I can barely put too much black pepper on my stuff, and that's a little too spicy. To then sit here and be like, they're rubbing this into his skin, cayenne pepper? You get that on your fingers and it burns, let alone a wound. So this is getting like way crazier than I thought. And I'm not trying to say that I didn't think it was already super crazy. Clearly I did. But this is like, oh, what? This is next level, okay? So let's go on to the next clip. Now, this next clip is just reiterating some of the before information that really is not, any kind of breaking news or anything. We've already heard this. But it does say that Kevin, 44, heard infrequently from his wife after Jodi. Then their marriage counselor came into their lives and was shocked by the circumstances surrounding her arrest. Kevin was shocked, his lawyer, Randy Kester, told People. It was at this point that he realized how deceived he had been. Now, again, like I said, I've done videos on this where it was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea and whatnot. Maybe he didn't know that this level was going on. One would hope, because we would have tons more questions, right? If it turned out that he knew this kind of stuff was going on. So I would like to think that he did not know this was going on. Still, we definitely do have questions as to how could you remain this far removed from the scenario? And it sounds like, as we'll get to here in a minute, that other family members had lots of questions about this behavior too, which makes it more like, why would you stay gone for so long with no contact with all these people raising major red flags? However, some of them did not say anything, others did. Yeah, I digress. As we'll get into the next article that we read, though, some of the people, his own children, who are raising red flags, it's like, well, from the looks of it, he didn't want to hear that. So there's lots of questions surrounding his role in this. And I think that's one thing that has people upset, reading the comment sections and things like that, is they're just like, well, look, how much did he truly know? What was his involvement? Or are we looking at a scenario of some of the stuff happening because of lack of involvement? Let's go ahead on to the third clip. Jodi, who was divorced and estranged from her own children, claimed to specialize in you-know-what addiction, but had been reprimanded by the state in 2012 for having an inappropriate relationship with a client. Now, again, we've heard this information about Jodi. This is like circulated about, she was divorced, estranged from her own children. You can start to piece together the narrative of how we arrive at what she seems to like to do to victimize people. Now, that being said, again, I ain't no doctor, I ain't no lawyer, I ain't no shrink, ain't none of that stuff, right? So I don't know, you know what I'm saying? I don't know her, I don't know any of that kind of stuff. But just from the sofa perspective, it's like, okay, this person has something going on where no relationship with her own family and likes to seemingly decimate other families. You know what I mean? You can see a pattern going on here. Essentially, what we call it, misery loves company. Now, we're going to move on to a much larger little clip here. I'm going to read through it because it's had a lot of stuff in it that I was like, oh, whoa. So here we go. So it says, a year later, following a trip with Jodi and another counselor, Ruby told Kevin that his attitude was infesting the family, Kester said, and that the only way for them to save their marriage was to separate. Kevin moved out in July 2022 while continuing to attend weekly sessions with Jodi. He lived in a townhouse near the family home, and a counselor from Connections stayed with him and supervised him. Their son Chad moved out with him, but Jodi ordered them to separate, claiming they were enabling one another, Kester said. Jodi commanded that Kevin cut off communication with most people and only talked to Ruby if she reached out first. And the year that followed, Ruby was only allowed to contact Kevin 3 or 4 times, Kester said. Social workers investigated the couple in June 2020 when concern was raised over troubling YouTube videos, but the Utah's Division of Child and Family Services couldn't substantiate the abuse allegations. As Ruby traveled back and forth between Springfield and staying with Jodi and Ivins, where they were later arrested, social workers and police visited several times in response to calls from a neighbor and the Frankie's estranged daughter, Shari. Whoa. Okay, so let's revisit some parts of this right here, okay? So, number one, Kevin moved out in July 22 while continuing to attend the weekly sessions. This is just nothing new here. She separates the family, continues to drain typically the man's, wallet or whatever. But it's not, if it needs to be the other way and she's draining the wife's wallet, she don't discriminate in that, right? Everyone's money spends the same, as we can see with Jodi. Now, the next thing here is this part. He lived in a townhouse near the family home, and a counselor from Connections stayed with him and supervised him. Are you kidding me? Okay, this is so creepy. This is next level. Now, this part gets me too. Their son Chad moves out with him, but Jodi orders them to separate, claiming they were enabling one another. I mean, this is where you get into, this person was out to completely destroy the family inmate unit, which is what runs all over me, because it's all about this turn your pain into joy, be there for your family. And it's like you're separating and destroying families because yours seemingly doesn't want anything to do with you, So it's almost like this bitterness or something. I don't know. Now let's go over one more thing here. So Jodi commanded that Kevin cut off communication with most people and only talked to Ruby if she reached out first. But then the next thing, in the year that followed, Ruby was only allowed, keyword allowed, to contact Kevin 3 or 4 times. Now, I am not trying to sit here and say, oh, he gets a free pass because of this. Because again, throughout this, there are certain levels of this and I'm like, oh, whoa, hold on. There are so many red flags that should be like a no. We've heard from other victims. I can't think of his name right now, not Adam, but the other guy, but usually include him in almost everything I do here, where he's like, I was enough on the Zoom where I stood up and was like, this isn't right. This is getting evil. At what point do you say, whoa, stop? You're living in a townhome because you've been instructed to move out. Your son can't even live with you. You're not allowed to talk to your wife. She's only contacted. This is red flag central. Now, again, on the other side, I'm like, I get where it's like, okay, well, there's this power dynamic. Number one, you have their YouTube business, which again, conflict of interest with the family, right? So it's like all this money's coming from there, then that goes away. They're probably scrambling to do whatever. She joins with connections. Jodi gets her claws in. You just see how it all happens. What I would have liked to have seen, and again, we haven't heard directly from Kevin. We don't know at this point. We've only heard via his lawyer and whatnot, but I'm like, did he try to, say no to this at one point? You know what I mean? Like, at what point did he just like go along with this? Like, where was he at with this process? Because this whole thing right here with how just, manipulative she seems to have been with the family, I'm like, whoa, dude, no, absolutely no. Now, the heartbreaking part, of course, is when you read the part down further about the social workers investigating. They can't find anything wrong. How many cases have we seen where social workers, CPS, all this, whatever it's called in each state, gets involved? Nope, we don't see anything, and then horrifying things happen. We've seen cases of children, they were all alive, at least in this one. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be like, oh, so they should, not even consider them, whatever. And no, it's still just as bad, right? They were victimized 100%, but I'm just saying that it's like bad stuff comes from this when CPS and all these people get involved and it doesn't seem that anything happens, and it's very frustrating. So thank God that they're alive. It could have been 10 times worse. Now, that being said, the next thing about, Ruby going back and forth, neighbors calling and whatnot, the oldest daughter, who we're getting ready to talk about that now. That's the part that I'm like, all these people are saying stuff. So again, with Kevin, I just come back to this. How deep was he really in this? And on that question, on that note, let's use that to segue into the next article here. Now, before we talk about Shari Frankie, let's talk about who she was, and just very briefly here. But you'll see on this article here, it says the Frankie's eldest child, Shari, is a student at BYU. She said in an April podcast that she cut ties with her family in 2022 after her mother began working with Hildebrandt on connections. Following her mother's arrest, she posted a picture of police officers to her Instagram story with the caption, "Finally." And a subsequent post, she said she was glad justice is being served. Now, you can see on the screen here that post that she did on her Insta, on her gram. What do people call that these days? Or just Instagram? I don't know, right? I'm not trying to be cool. I'm just trying to keep up. Lord. But you see this here finally. So this lets you know where she stands, right? This is what I'm talking about. So here you have the oldest daughter. Justice is served. I broke ties. And we've heard from Ruby's sisters and whatnot. Remember, this is like a vlog family, right? Now all of a sudden they're coming out. Oh, we didn't believe this stuff either. We didn't like her, but we don't say anything, talking about Jodi and her teachings and whatnot. So do with that what you will. Let's get into this last article about Kevin, the father, wanting to file charges against his oldest daughter. So you'll see on the screen here, it says Kevin Frankie sought burglary charges against eldest daughter. This is by Derek Fox, posted on October 5th. Now moving on to the first page here, it says Salt Lake City, ABC4. Police documents obtained by them show Kevin Frankie, the estranged husband of the YouTube mother, Ruby Frankie, wanted to charge his daughter with burglary in early September. Documents show a Department of Child and Family Services caseworker returned to Frankie's Springville home the day after Ruby and Jodi Hildebrandt's arrest in order to get necessary belongings for the two Frankie children taken into state custody in southern Utah. Items included clothing and personal belongings. The caseworker had asked police to come along in order to keep the peace, as they believe Kevin Frankie may have been home and that he may not be cooperative. Okay, so it's just starting off here. This is building the foundation for the story, right? He wants to charge, with the burglary. This is what's going on. The caseworker's gone there. We request a police officer. We're getting stuff from here. So, okay, cool. Let's go to the next one. It says when officers arrived at the Springville home, they found the caseworker, Frankie's eldest daughter, Shari, and other family members had already entered the home. Officers told the group they were only there to keep the peace and were not going to get involved in property disputes. Officers also reportedly told them to only take what they needed and leave behind anything that did not belong to them. Now, this sounds very on par, right? The cops are there. This is a civil matter at this point. We're here to keep the peace, but we're not going to get into this is mine and this type of stuff. Again, kudos to the caseworker for doing their homework, have the police come, all this stuff. Let's keep going. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, right? So it says a few days later, Kevin and Frankie called the Springville Police Department reporting a burglary at the home. Frankie said the door had been kicked in, damaged, and several electronics, including electronic journals, were missing. He reportedly told police he believed Shari was to blame. Now, let's just start off right there. So when I was first reading this before I got to the last sentence right there, I was like this. I was like, well, yeah, of course, that would be normal. Your door's broken in, stuff's missing. You might very well think a burglary happened. If you follow true crime, if you follow any kind of stuff like that, you see a lot of times how these things go down and these houses can be turned upside down. It looks like somebody ransacked and burglarized your home, right? But then I got to the last sentence. He reportedly told police he believed Shari was to blame. And I was like, very interesting. So let's keep going before I talk more about my opinions on that. So second paragraph, it says, I explained to Kevin that the door was breached when Springville Police Department served a warrant on the home earlier that week looking for juveniles, a Springville officer reported. I also explained to him that we conducted a keep the peace call with Shari at the home because she needed to retrieve essential items for the children. Okay, so there's that. Very normal. He tells them this is what's going on. This is what happened. Remember, this whole arresting goes down. They're looking for Ruby. They're doing this. They couldn't get into the house. The blinds are all drawn. Totally sus. So, they do what they have to do, right? I mean, they just took 2 children out of Jodi's home with open wounds and duct tape that now allegedly we're hearing cayenne pepper and honey are smeared at him. Can you imagine? No wonder that man broke down in tears that called 911. God bless him. So let's go on to the last page here. Now it says Kevin, who reportedly admitted to not having been in the home for over a year, said Shari was not allowed to go into the house. Police reached out to Shari, who confirmed she took the electronics, but was happy to return them upon request. Police said Shari didn't have any intent to deprive Kevin of the items, so they wouldn't be pressing charges against her. After the call, she reportedly gave police 3 tablets, 3 cell phones, 3 cameras, a stack of written journals, and 3 passports, all of which were returned to Kevin without incident. Okay, now pause right there. Now, I don't know if I read this somewhere in another article or in a comment section or what. So just know this is not my original thought. Okay, this is coming from elsewhere. But even reading it, I'm like, Imagine what is on those things. Imagine what is on those things. I am very curious if she got information off of that to turn in, like evidence basically, right? Now, so there's that right there, right? Secondly, Kevin hasn't been there yet, hands off, but he knows for certain the one rule we're going to go by is she can't go in that house. Very interesting. Well, you've already heard the way Jodi was running that household, because Jodi was running that household. Kevin and Ruby were, Ruby was running the household too, but you know what I'm saying? It sounded like Jodi was a shot caller of the family, completely not related to them. Well, you already know she's not going to want Shari anywhere near. Who knows what she said about her? Who knows how she was trying to manipulate that? So the fact that Kevin is saying this afterwards goes back to my whole thing where I'm like, well, hold on. How much of this do we know? How much of there was an involvement? Because why are you so hard pressed against Shari, who clearly hunches were, she's sitting here saying, hello, I'm cutting ties. I'm not down with this Jodi stuff and all that. But yet here Kevin is, he doesn't want her in the house. Let's get burglary charges. She stole this. I mean, come on. So it almost for me is like not a line in the sand, but a line in the sand that's like, oh, okay, that's how involved Kevin is in it. That's how deep he is in it. Whether you want to call it brainwashing, whether you want to call it he's down with their beliefs, whatever. It was just like okay moment for me. Let's finish it off. It says police reported explaining to Kevin that criminal charges would not be filed in the case and that it would be considered a civil issue. Kevin was displeased with this answer and advised that we could be hearing from his attorney, reported the officer. Now it just goes into the next things that we can look forward to, which is saying, he's currently fighting for custody of the children. There's a pretrial hearing at Provo Juvenile Court in December, or he appeared for that. And then it says the hearing scheduled a pretrial date for Tuesday, October 17th in person, and a mediation set just days prior on October 11th. So here's the thing. So we're not going to press charges, and you're going to hear from my attorney over this. I mean, again, it's like a line in the sand for me, like, okay, so that's where he stands with things, right? I would give good money to know what's on those things. Good money to know. Imagine the unedited footage. I don't know how they ran their YouTube channel, I'm saying, if somebody did their stuff for them and whatnot, but if the stuff that we saw Ruby was willing to put out there for the public, imagine what was going on behind closed doors that, we don't know if her kids were recording stuff along the way that they didn't know about. I imagine that they probably ran that household in such a way that there was no privacy, though. So this makes me kind of shift my thought process. Now, again, I was already not like, oh God, poor little Kevin, because I had lots of questions about this, right? And again, don't know the man, haven't walked in his shoes, so, there's that perspective, right? Don't know him at all. But seeing the allegations that are coming out, I guess my first thing is like, why are you wanting to press charges against your daughter who's trying to help your other children? Like, what has she done that's so bad? Unless you are more aligned with the thought processes of Ruby and Jodi. Now clearly he went along with them, right? He was willing to separate from the family, willing to go through all this stuff that a lot of us are just kind of like, well, why though? What went down with that? A huge thing for me is going to be the custody battle going on right now, where that ends up landing. Are they going to give him custody of these children? That will be a huge telltale sign. Now, obviously, we know if we followed these cases, like I said earlier, oftentimes this is where the system fails, and they'll be like, oh, hey, you can go back with this parent or whatever, and bad things happen. So I'm not trying to say that it's a perfect system by any means, is what I'm getting at, nor am I trying to say that Kevin would do something intentionally horrible to the children. I'm just saying it's a broken system that, it'll be interesting if the judge says, you ain't getting your kids back, buddy. That's not happening right now. That will speak volumes to me. So we'll just have to wait and see. I'm curious to know what you think. Again, I speak to when I talk about some of the opinions and whatnot, and like people are saying it's from me reading comment sections. I love reading the comment sections on these things and just kind of seeing what people are talking about and what their opinions are. It's one reason why I love the Sofa Squad, to kind of see what everybody's, what we all talk about this stuff. So I'm curious to know from the Sofa Squad with this, does this bit of him trying to get Shari charged with burglary and whatnot, where does this put you on the Richter scale with Kevin, right? Where were you to begin with? Like what was your opinion on it? Him, the situation, his actions, his inactions to begin with, and where did this change it, if at all? So let me know in the comment section. Also, Roscoe says over here, he's like, I might be sleeping, but I want them sofas down in the comment section, please. And until we meet on those little sofas to do our little Sofa Squad thing, I'll see y'all there.